You already know what needs to change in your life, so why are you still not doing it? Let's start with something simple. You only get one life, and most people don't really disagree with that, but they don't live like it. They live like there's always more time and more chances, more energy later. And so change gets postponed again and again. My name's Rick Cardwell. I'm a psychodynamic counsellor and therapist. This is a short video to understand why we struggle with change and why it's important that we should change. Now, here's the uncomfortable question I want you to sit with. If you already know what would make your life better, why aren't you doing it? Change isn't just hard because we're lazy or undisciplined. That's far too simplistic, and frankly, it's also unhelpful. Change is hard because your current life, no matter how painful parts of it are, has structure. It has familiarity. Even suffering can become predictable, and the brain tends to prefer predictable suffering over uncertain improvement. So when someone says, just change your life, it sounds simple, but internally it's not simple at all. It's disruption, it's uncertainty, it's identity shift, and that's where people get stuck. Let's talk about self-help for a moment. If self-help books alone worked, we would all be fixed. We'd read a book, underline a few passages, feel motivated for a weekend, and then everything would permanently change. But that's not how human behaviour works. Knowledge isn't the problem. Most people already know what they should do. The gap is not information, it's implementation. You don't need another explanation of what's wrong. You already have that list. You could probably write it right now. Drinking too much, smoking, staying in relationships that drain the life out of you, staying out of relationships when you actually want them, connection, holding on to resentment, avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding your own responsibility in small daily choices. People already know, and yet nothing changes. So we have to ask a more honest question. What is the function of staying the same? Because there is always one. Suffering is often maintained, not accidental. Here's a difficult idea. If your life contains patterns that can cause suffering and they continue long term, it usually means something in you is maintaining that suffering. Not because you want to suffer, but because those patterns are doing something else for you too. They might be comforting you in the short term, numbing emotional discomfort, avoiding fear or shame, providing distraction, or even protecting a familiar identity. For example, someone might drink too much, not because they want to ruin their life, but because alcohol temporarily shuts down anxiety, loneliness, or self-criticism. The cost is long-term stability, but the immediate relief wins, and that's how the loop stays in place. Let me give you a simple example I've seen many times in practice. Imagine someone who says, I want to stop drinking so much in the evenings. They know it's affecting their sleep, their mood, their relationships. They can even list the consequences clearly. But every evening, the same thing happens. Work finishes, stress drops, and then a quiet discomfort shows up. Restlessness, emptiness, tension, whatever it is. And the brain says, you deserve to switch off. One drink becomes two, two becomes more, and the cycle resets. Now, here's the important part. They don't lack insight, they lack interruption. So what actually begins change is not a big life overall. It might be something very small, not buying alcohol that day, changing the route home, going for a walk before getting in, texting someone instead of isolating, sitting with the discomfort for 10 minutes without actually acting on it. And what tends to happen, almost surprisingly, is this. The first small interruption creates space. And in that space, something shifts. Not dramatically, not instantly, but noticeably. Clarity increases slightly, self-respect increases slightly, and the next small change becomes more possible. Most people think change comes from big decisions, but in reality, change is built from small discontinuities in behaviour. One small break in the pattern tells your brain this is not automatic anymore. And once that happens, something interesting begins. You start noticing other areas. Not because you suddenly become more aware, but because you've disrupted the loop that was keeping everything else stable. Change spreads, not all at once, but step by step. Now, why do you feel stuck even when you know better? A lot of people assume if I know what I should do, I should be able to do it. But knowing is not the same as being able to execute under emotional load. When you're tired, stressed, lonely or frustrated, your brain prioritises relief over long-term planning. That's not a moral failure. That's the human nervous system and how it functions. But it does mean this. You cannot rely on insight alone. You need structure, interruption, and repetition of small corrective actions. Now, what will happen if you don't change? It's also worth being honest about the direction of inertia. If nothing changes, patterns don't stay neutral. They tend to compound. Small avoidances become larger avoidances. Small resentments become hardened perspectives. Small coping mechanisms become dependency cycles, and over time, life becomes narrower, not suddenly, but gradually. And it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people around you, partners, children, friends, because emotional patterns always leak into relationships. There's also something many people overlook. The way you treat yourself teaches you what you think you deserve. If you constantly override your own needs, ignore your own signals, and tolerate things you know are harmful, you're reinforcing a kind of internal hierarchy where you come last. And eventually that becomes your baseline. And when you begin to treat yourself with basic consistency, not perfection, not rigidity, just consistency, you start to build something very different. And that is self-trust. And self-trust is what allows change to hold. Let's be clear. The goal is not perfection. It's not becoming someone who never struggles, never slips, never fails, never falls back into old patterns. That's unrealistic. The goal is movement. It's gradually reducing the things that are clearly not helping you, even if it's messy, even if it's inconsistent at first. Because what you're doing is shifting direction, not arriving at a final version of yourself. The brain doesn't passively observe new situations. It adapts to meet them. We don't just learn new environments intellectually, we reorganize around them. When your situation changes, your habits, attention, emotional responses, and even priorities begin to shift. Not because you are forcefully rewriting yourself, but because the demands placed on you change what gets reinforced. So when people move into healthier environments, even just make small, consistent changes, they often notice, I feel different in myself. That's not imaginary, that's called adaptation. And one of the biggest traps people fall into is waiting until they feel ready. But readiness is often a feeling that follows action, not one that precedes it. You don't think your way into change, you behave your way into it. Small interruptions, small corrections repeated, and over time, what felt impossible starts to feel normal. So here's the core idea. If your life is producing suffering in ways that are clearly linked to your patterns that you repeat, then change isn't optional. It's the only direction that reduces that suffering. Not dramatic change, not overwhelming change, but practical, small, consistent change. Because the alternative isn't neutrality, it's continuation. And continuation in the absence of change tends to deepen whatever you're already living with. So the question becomes very simple. What is one small thing you already know is not helping you that you could stop doing today? Not everything, just one. Start there. So thank you for watching. If you get something from these videos, then please like, subscribe or share, and hopefully this will help reach other people. If you have any questions for me, I can be contacted through the usual social media outlets and channels. And thank you for watching. I'll be back with another video shortly.